Welcome to the Daruma Dojo Dialogues. This is episode 1, and I'm with my good friend, Noah Myers. All right, Noah. So we were thinking about having a podcast so we can be cool like all the other people. And you were the first person I thought I should have on episode 1.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, welcome. So tell me a little bit about yourself. When did you start Jiu-Jitsu?
I started Jiu-Jitsu in 2012 as a result of some health issues that I needed to take care of, kind of more seriously than not. And I had been a martial artist for a long, long time when I was younger, and I had taken a break for a long time. And one of my really good friends from Apple, when I was working at Apple, said, just come hang out with us. Just come see what it's about. And I'd never done Jiu-Jitsu before, but I had seen it. Like a lot of people start their journeys by seeing it on UFC, seeing it in other MMA competitions. And I said, okay, yeah, let's just go figure it out. Let me go try it out. And I went and I was instantly hooked. Like it was one of those, like, I have a puzzle type brain and I saw the puzzle elements like immediately, and I saw strategy elements immediately, and that's my jam. I love doing that. And I was doing that for pretty much consistently from then to now, minus the pandemic. So
you have about 10 years experience with Jiu-Jitsu. And you started, where were you when you started? You said Apple, so you were in the Bay Area?
No, I was in Hawaii.
Oh, Apple in Hawaii.
Yeah, I started in Hawaii. I was working at Apple Retail. And so he was a coworker of mine, and he was like, hey, come on out. He was a brown belt at the time. Cool. Come out to my gym with my instructor. Very small gym. Like we only had about 7, 8 people consistently coming every week. And I was the smallest, believe it or not.
Oh, how big were you then?
When I first started, I was 270 pounds.
Holy moly, you were bigger then, huh? Wow.
Oh yeah, way bigger then. So, and everyone there, much bigger. Like 320s, 350, and it was one of those, like, I was the smallest person in the gym for a long time.
So everyone there was playing a lot of guard and doing beating bolos and stuff?
No, absolutely not. I was the bottom one. I was the one trying to play a lot of guard and keep them off of me. But that's how I developed a good sense of safety and security in the bottom, is being on the bottom for a long time against these bigger opponents. So,
crazy.
Yeah.
So the people there, they are much bigger than you, and you had to work a lot of your defense. What was the name of the gym or at the time?
Again, it was a small gym, and I was doing both. It was a private gym. The main guy's name is Brian Wong, and Chris Templo was my good friend. They had their small gym run out of like a massage therapy place. They had mats, and then had massage therapy, physical therapy, and kind of a back and forth thing. And then they convinced me to move over to UFC with them. So they were UFC and the small gym, and I kind of stuck with UFC for a long, long time, and that's where I met you. Yeah. Coming from Hawaii to here, I found the closest UFC that I had to work, and started seeing you, and then things grew from there.
Right.
Yeah.
The UFC gym in Hawaii, this is Honolulu?
Yeah, so that's the one the primary one was in downtown Honolulu.
Yeah.
And then I also frequented the Waikele version and the Mililani version too. But yeah, all 3 of them, very, very popular. And so I would jump to all 3 because within 20 minute distance.
That's cool. Then you get to try different classes, different training partners and stuff.
Exactly.
When you moved to the mainland, what belt were you at that time?
I was a blue belt, a couple stripes, in 2016. And then I started going to UFC, and I purposely was like playing like background. I just wanted to learn, wanted to be anything. But then like the instructor there, Sean Whitmore, was very encouraging and very supportive of my teaching experience and stuff like that I've had from my previous careers, and kind of put me in the forefront of teaching. And that's one of my passions, is to help people learn and understand things. So I embraced that in Jiu-Jitsu right before Purple. And when I got to Purple, he was like, "Hey, now you're a forefront example in our gym. Mm-hmm. You're going to be a resource for people to come and ask questions." And I'm like, "That's all good." And then he's got me into substituting classes. So if he needed a sick day or something, I would jump in, and stuff like that. So it started. My teaching experience with Jiu-Jitsu started right around then too.
Nice. Okay. So I remember I got the job right after the pandemic. I got offered the job at the UFC gym as the head instructor, right? And then one day you just came up to me and you said, "Hey, I used to coach here before the pandemic, and if you ever need help, like, let me know." And I was like, "Okay, like, who is this guy coming to me and saying like, I used to coach here, da 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 da. And so I kind of like put it in the back of my mind, and I was, I guess I was a little careful, like, who is this guy? But like later, I really appreciate that you came up to me that day and told me that. So that you really helped out a lot in coaching at the UFC gym and also here. So that was really cool. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
I just still remember that day. I was sitting down against the wall, and you came to me, and you're like, I used to coach here, so if you ever need help, let me know. I know how things go. But that was cool. Like, you were born and raised in Hawaii, or
No.
so how did that happen? How did you come to Hawaii?
I'm a military brat. So my dad has been in the military for a long, long time. He's a retired Army, and I moved around an awful lot when I was younger. I moved to Hawaii after graduating from UCSD with a physics degree to pursue my postgraduate degree at University of Hawaii. And so I was part of the doctorate program there, learning a lot of stuff about, my specialty was astrophysics. So I learned a lot about dark matter and doing research there. Decided to leave after getting my master's degree just because I thought teaching might be a more lucrative part in Hawaii, and I taught at UH for several years before also getting a job at Apple. And so, it was a very, very good experience teaching big classes. It's one of those you're teaching a 500 person class at lower division, physics and astronomy and math and all that other good stuff. It was very crazy for me because naturally I'm an introvert.
Right.
And it gets kind of scary if you're looking out into the crowd and you see 500 people looking at everything you do. But that prepared me, I think, really well for any of the other teaching in the future that I was doing. I deal with much smaller groups now, max 40, 50. Like in our classes here, sometimes we get in the 40s. Right. And I'm much more comfortable there than I am at 500. But it prepared me a lot.
I can't even imagine teaching that many people. What helped you to teach in front of so many people? What sort of techniques or mindsets?
It's very interesting. I created a mask in order to wear during my teaching that is very different than my actual personality. And every time I'd walk into the classroom as put on my teaching hat, put on my teaching mask, and then I use that mask to teach, and then I get such interesting feedback in like office hours when it's like more private, more one-on-one or two-on-one, whatever kind of environment. They're like, you're such a different person in this environment than you are in the classroom. Like I have to. That's the only way that I can survive as an introvert is to kind of put on a teaching mask and then go from there. But that was the primary strategy that let me survive without getting overly stressed.
That's smart. Yeah. Like almost becoming a different persona when you're teaching in order to step into that room with all the people.
Exactly.
And I see that when you coach the classes, like you have a very academic approach to jiu-jitsu. You seem to be someone who likes to do like flow charts, and you like to look at things in like through a lens of physics. Can you like expand on that? Like how your physics studies prior to jiu-jitsu, or that was before jiu-jitsu, right? Mm-hmm. Prior to jiu-jitsu helped you look at jiu-jitsu.
Absolutely. I mean, like I'm an academic person by heart. Like I love school. If I could be a professional student and get paid what we get paid, I would absolutely be a professional student for my entire life. And I've developed some methods that help me learn pretty much anything. I think that's my number one like attribute, as I'm a quick learner of anything that I put my mind to. And some of the things that I apply to jiu-jitsu is in physics, I took it upon myself to do every problem in the book, regardless of what homework the assignment was. I did every single problem, 1 through 150, whatever, each chapter. And that allowed me to see all the possible scenarios that could come up on a test instead of just some of the scenarios that showed up on a test. And I take that like strategy with jiu-jitsu too. I take every position, break it down to what are all the possible scenarios that could come from this kind of area. And then I take that and break that down into even more branches and seeing what happens here or there. And my practice is always about predictability or lack of predictability and how I can capitalize on those types of things. But a lot of that is done on paper. So I'll make a flow chart and say, hey, this is all I know from this spot. Let's explore this today. Let's explore that tomorrow. Let's explore that next week. and then go back and say, I'm going to fill in all these little gaps, all these little question marks to see what would happen if I did this, what would happen if I do that. And that's helped me quite a bit with how I've progressed my jiu-jitsu as a whole, knowing where my weak spots are, and then focusing on those weak spots for months, and then filling in those gaps that I had before. And usually I do it like once a year. I'll go back and take assessment of where I need to work on and what I need to do, and that's helped me get through the very typical normal plateaus in jiu-jitsu. You get to a point where you're like, I feel like I'm not progressing. Okay, fine. Let's go back and hit the paper, figure out where I need to work on that, and that gives me motivation for the next couple months. I find like progression there, I feel satisfied about it, and then I can move on to the next section.
That's really cool. Do you have an actual piece of paper that you write on?
I have on my phone the flowcharts that I do it on my phone. I used to have notebooks.
Is a flowchart, is it an app or is it just like a notes?
There's a free app called MindMeister. I don't know, free plug. MindMeister is a digital, you get 3 free flowcharts with it. And
is this for jiu-jitsu or for anything?
It's for anything. It's just a flowchart app.
Okay.
And so what I did is I took every position that we know and love, and I broke it down into like, what 3 things can I do from the top? Okay. What 3 things can I do from the bottom?
Can we just do an example?
Yeah, so let's say half guard. Okay. So if we start in half guard, here's the header, in there, top, and then bottom, 3 submissions from half guard top.
Okay.
Kimura, et cetera, 3 either transitions or escapes from half guard bottom. And then I can connect those lines to other positions. So if I transition from half guard bottom to back take, that connects this line to back take over here. I'm on the back now. What 3 things can I do from back top? Oh, rear naked choke, arm bar, blah, blah, blah. Hey, guess what? Transition to mount. Oh, guess what? That connects over here to the mount line. And so I do this like spider web of things, which is really, really cool, that you don't necessarily see when you're in the moment. But when you're on a piece of paper, you can say, I never saw that connection before. If I just move my leg a little bit this way, I'm here. And then you have a whole nother branch. Start doing jiu-jitsu from there.
That reminds me of a couple things. One, it reminds me of kind of like neurological synapses, like all these different connections to like how every position will connect in one way or another. And then also, now it reminds me of another thing. What's that, like 3rd degree Kevin Bacon?
Yeah. So
it's like every single position somehow will get you back to another position.
Yep.
And then also what I visualized was, like a detective who's trying to figure out all the strings.
Yeah, strings everywhere, right? And that's why when we in class sometimes we do a string theory. I call it string theory as a second name of kind of a fun game. Is that okay? We're going to create a string, and the string is going to connect this to this, and however you want to get there, you can. But you're going to go through these 4 or 5 different things.
Do you
creating a
string? What the 2 things are?
Yes. So you can give them a beginning and an end, and you're like, I don't care how you get there. Just go from here to there, and then keep track of all the steps in between, and that's going to fill out your flow chart eventually when you start doing this more and more.
I see. So you can say, I want you to connect closed guard to S mount or something like that.
Yep.
And then they have to sweep and pass maybe and get to the S mount.
Yeah, and everybody's going to have a different way of getting there. So which is a nice, like during a class environment, it's nice to do a show and tell at the end of that, because you have a pair over here that might get there a completely different way than over here, but they might overlap, and when they share each other, like, oh man, that was a really cool idea. I could have done that instead, right? Or like, I think I could use both of these in tandem and say, I'll do this and then do that. And it really expands a lot of the possibilities in the classroom environment.
Yeah. And that's the way you teach like the classes in that way, like with your flow charts or with your string theory. And then having a show and tell and kind of sharing everyone's ideas. It's very different than a typical BJJ class.
Yeah, for sure.
Where you have a warm up, a few techniques, a few rounds of rolling, and the end of the day, right?
Yep.
So is this something that you totally created because of your academic history, or did somebody teach you like this, or did you learn from somebody like this? Because I've never seen classes really taught like that. I've picked up a lot from the way you teach with games. I never give people pens and papers usually like you do, but definitely with your games that you do, I like to steal that from you a little bit.
Yeah, I found really early on that when I get into certain positions and I only know set things, that we all stick to those set things.
Right.
And that we don't necessarily in the moment get a chance to be creative with what we do with our jiu-jitsu. And we're kind of stuck in I only know this move, so I'm going to do this move, or I only know this set of moves. And if you don't get a chance to be creative early on in jiu-jitsu, you get stuck in this having to do the moves that you know, instead of expanding your creativity and saying, look, you know what, I don't know what this is called, but the concepts are solid. Yeah. And once I do the concepts, this will work. And then you come up with interesting and creative ways out of problems. And that's how, like for me, I solve a lot of problems doing non-traditional things. And it helps me get outside of the box of what traditional jiu-jitsu is. But encouraging the creativity of everyone, you're going to come up with really cool stuff. Like I don't necessarily think that leg locks would have happened if somebody just said, well, you gotta stick with traditional jiu-jitsu. Right. But someone said, well, let's figure out leg stuff. And then somebody encouraged that, and they developed it, and now it's a huge thing, right? So I think it's every opportunity that we can have to exercise our creativity is a valuable opportunity. And that's one of the pillars of my teaching style.
Yeah. That's one of the things I love about jiu-jitsu is the creativity aspect, right? Like it's so fun to explore and to try different things. Like I've seen some high-level professors that say, hey, this is the system and stick to the system because it works, right? And then they're trying to put everybody in a box. And for me, I find that maybe like if you find your own system that you specialize in and that you can perfect, especially for competition, it's great. And you're definitely going to need like room for improvisation, because if you don't have that, you'll never be a champion. But it's going to veer slightly from that system, right? But if you just do that all the time, it's not fun. Like, and then when you exercise your creativity, it becomes very fun. So when people are like swearing by this system and trying to put a 150-pound woman and a 250-pound guy, one who's very flexible, one who's not, in the same box, I think it's very limiting.
For sure.
Yeah. And those exercises that you do are trying to help people practice and develop their creativity and get out of those, like you said in the beginning, was the patterns that people, that we get stuck in patterns. And then once we are able to like think of jiu-jitsu in a different way, because jiu-jitsu you're doing it physically, right? All the time. It's everything is physical. And then when you start to look at things or discuss, because you usually have partners kind of get together and they start discussing, and then they figure that out. Now, just because we're talking about jiu-jitsu in a discussion, it's no longer in its like normal realm. Right. So we have to use like our brains differently. Right. And they're like, oh, okay, like.
And like I've never written it down before. That's so interesting to me. I'd actually have to write it down. And I keep getting like reactions like, oh, this is like school. I'm like, yeah. And then the reason why school works the way it does is it exercises certain parts of your brain in different ways that jiu-jitsu in history hasn't really embraced that as much, and we've found very, very valuable to approach jiu-jitsu in a way that we've learned other things. So yes, we've learned other things by practice and experience, but what about studying, and what about academics, and finding people that you are similar to and studying their game and try to apply it to your game, see if it works, and if it doesn't work, why not? And challenging that kind of system so that you can go, it doesn't work because for me, I have this issue, or because for me, I'm more comfortable here. And then you can adapt your own style to that. So it's definitely an interesting thing. It's like when you feel like you're stuck in a box, you don't get to grow much. But once you get let out of the box, you grow massively, which is really, really cool to me.
Yeah, I really like a couple of things you just mentioned. One was studying people that are similar to you. Like when I was playing baseball growing up, like in high school and college, that's what a lot of coaches like recommended. Like, oh, find a baseball player that you like their swing and just copy them, and then try to, take what they're doing and add it to your game. And then as you start to copy them, eventually like you're going to start to evolve and make it your own, right? So same thing with jiu-jitsu. I found myself doing that a lot with, once I started to really enjoy like deep half guard, I would watch Bernardo Faria and watch his competition videos, and I would just see like the way he sets it up or the grips that he makes, and I would just do it in the gym or in the dojo. So that's a really good thing. I love watching like competition videos and seeing what they're doing and what's working, and then It's like, oh man, I want to get better at lasso. So who can I watch that has a really good lasso? Or I want to get better at spider guard, right? Well, why don't you like copy the people that are doing good? So yeah, and you said earlier too, like that you can try to copy somebody, but then certain things are not going to work for you. So we have a thing in the dojo called the anti-Noah moves, right? So the things that don't work for Noah, all right? So can you, what does that mean? What's an like I'll teach something sometimes and you'll go to me and you'll be like, this is the anti-Noah move.
Yeah.
I'll put that in the,
Put that in the not Noah box.
Yeah.
So I have flexibility issues. We can just say that. So I can't do certain things like inversions. I can't do certain things like put my legs behind my head, type of thing like that. And so what it forces me to do in those scenarios in which we're teaching something for the entire class, I kind of take myself out a little bit, and that's my own creative bubble to come up with how to get from A to B, which is exactly the move that we're trying, without having the inversion, without having the thing that is supposed like central to the move. I was like, okay, well, what is needed here? I need to get from here to here in some way.
It's a string theory.
Sort of like as a mini string. Because let's say like a Delahiva Barambolo type of thing, right? Yeah. And we've done Delahiva Barambolo type stuff all the time where I can't do the inversion to get over, right? And so I said, well, what's the goal? The goal is to get his body there. The goal is to get my body here in a way that doesn't sacrifice this, that, or the other thing. That's my little creative bubble that I can work within that and say, okay, what can I do to support this move and get to the same end result without having to barambolo?
Yeah.
And those are like my little mini creative bubbles that I can work with within the class, which is good. But yeah, there's tons of not Noah stuff, and I try my hardest to work around it.
Yeah, and I think like in the beginning when we were first training together, I felt like you would get frustrated. Or do you still get frustrated with certain things, or now do you get less frustrated knowing that you have these kind of strategies to work around?
It's still frustrating.
Or do people or has other coaches in the past, or even myself, like look and say like, you could do this, like why can't you do this? Or do they get frustrated as a coach?
Oh, that happens all the time. Yeah. And I think there's people that don't know me very well will assume that when I say I can't do it, it's because I don't want to do it or I don't want to try to do it. But it's not that. It's I know my physical limits and I know what I can or cannot do over 10 plus years of jiu-jitsu. And it's not something like, oh, just stretch more. I'm like, no, that's not the case. But what is the case for me is that I've gone through that set of exercises to try to figure out if I can or cannot do it. And it's one of those like, if it's a physical limitation, I'll find my way around it. So I'm more confident in being able to find those solutions. But it is one of those like, it's in the not Noah box. I know it's in the not Noah box. You may not know it's in the not Noah box.
I'm starting to understand a little more than Noah box.
Yeah, the Noah box is what I can or cannot do. And I find it very interesting and creative to try to work my way around it. So I might go outside the box and come back in the box in some other way. Mm-hmm. But I find it's a challenge, but it's rewarding when I do find a solution to it.
Yeah, and I've as a professor or as a coach, like have seen you become very creative when you're like, okay, we're gonna do this lasso inversion to a sweep, or lasso invert. We were doing this recently where we were doing a lasso and we would invert and get to an arm bar or something, and then I'm like, sorry, no, I know that's not in the Noah box, but let's see what you come up with, right? And I know that you're going to be able to like come up with something, and then sometimes you come up with something, and I never thought about it like that. So I'm like, hey, why don't you show the class your version, and so we all get to learn from what you created. So
yeah, and I find there's not, I mean, especially in the first couple of years of jiu-jitsu, there's a lot of like people that are in my same scenario that can't do certain things, and it helps them to have another way. Mm-hmm. Like it doesn't have them feel super defeated and say, well, go home that night and it's like, I wasn't able to do anything that class, because I've been there and that sucks. Mm-hmm. Going home in a whole class that's inverted everything, and I'm like, well, I suck at jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Because if I can't do that, I can't do that. I just feel terrible. Right. But having alternatives to things that necessarily are not physically oriented helps a lot psychologically too. It helps me come back and go, I know I couldn't do that, but I can do this. I know I couldn't do that, but I can do this instead. And having an answer to every one of those little defeats is actually a victory when you have an alternative.
Yeah, when you see the wall, you find the door or
Yep,
something. You go
exactly.
around it. So with your work that you do now, and this kind of goes into when you're finding a technique and you realize like, okay, this is an anti-Noah move, I have to work around it, or you see a technique and then you start to break it, right? Because I know that's something you earlier in the conversation you were talking about how you like jujitsu, or you found it as like problem solving and seeing the pieces of the puzzle, right? So sometimes you can see a technique and you're like, okay, what if I do this? So do you feel like when you see a technique, are you constantly trying to break it?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So how are you trying to break a technique? Let's say an armbar. When you see an armbar taught from a certain position, could be from mount or guard or whatever, what are you looking for to break a technique, and why do you look at it in that way?
For the longest time, I've been defensive first. Defense and prevention first.
I see.
And so what I do when I see something brand new or I feel something brand new is I'd say I've never seen it before and somebody's trying it on me. I'm like, what if I did that? Like, because you can usually see what they're going for. With enough experience, you're like, okay, you're trapping the arm. You're gonna pull my arm forward, and you're gonna bring the leg over, and I'm gonna get armbarred. Okay, so if I can eliminate one essential piece to that, I win. Just one, because if it's an essential piece, you need it to finish the armbar, and if I can keep you from getting that one essential piece, you won't armbar me. And so for me, having that ace of spades kind of to pull out anytime I want, being able to say, nah, you're not getting that one piece that you need, allows me to survive and allows me to think, gives me more time to be creative and get around whatever new thing might happen. So anytime I see a new technique, I'm always looking at it like, okay, I'm not going to give you that part. I'm going to do whatever I can to bring my elbows in so that you can't extend my elbows beyond and you can't get your leg in there, right? That type of mentality is how I approach every new position. Granted, it's not always a good thing, because if I want to learn something new and I'm focused on how to break it, I tend not to learn it because I'm like, well, I would just do this. I mean, somebody else would also just do that.
So you feel that that technique then loses its credibility?
A little bit, because if I immediately just saw it and I'm like, oh, I found a way to stop it, somebody else is going to see that too, and possibly do the same thing.
But if you know how to stop it, then you can counter how to stop it.
Exactly, and that's the game. That's the fun. It's like, okay, so now I know what's essential. I know what they're going to do to stop the essential piece. How can I counter that to create the essential piece for me? And that's where the discussions that we have a lot of times after class is like, what if I did this? And you're like, well, I wouldn't do that. I'm like, but why not? And that's where the discussions happen. They're really, really cool ones. They're like, well, I would just do that. And you go, well, nobody else would ever do that. I'm like, then it's a Noah move.
Yeah.
Then it's the Noah thing.
Yeah. Yeah, because we always, when we're showing a technique maybe for the class and you're the uke, and then, okay, what would you do in this situation? And then what's your response normally?
Do you want Noah jiu-jitsu or regular jiu-jitsu?
Regular jiu-jitsu, right? Because you normally, you don't have, like you said earlier, you don't have a traditional jiu-jitsu game. For the most part, you do very different things, right? With your defensive tactics. And that being said, with the way you're able to break techniques down, you're able to see the essential parts to a technique, which allows you to break the technique and allows you to be defensive. You are very difficult to submit. You're probably in the gym one of the hardest people here for me to submit, and so that's probably because of the way that you see those techniques and you kind of can able to defend. So that's in itself is very different from, I think, from my jiu-jitsu, where my jiu-jitsu for forever was all offense, and like I never even thought about defense, because if you're attacking, you have a good offense, you have a good defense, right? So so you kind of look at it in a different way.
Yeah, I definitely feel like I'm defense first, survive and be safe first, and then that gives you time to figure stuff out and then be offensive once you have a good defense, a solid defense behind you. Definitely.
Let's change the subject to music references.
Ah, yes. I love the music references.
All right. So, you're you, a white gentleman with glasses. And can you explain to me, Caucasian? I apologize. I don't want to offend anybody. You have a wide range of music knowledge.
Yeah.
So, like, you know all the hip hop, all the rock, all the oldies, all the jazz.
Everything but country.
Everything but country.
Everything but country. I hate country music.
And so we like to count how many music references that we come up with in each class.
Yeah. Particularly you come up with music references a lot, and you don't even realize that you come up with music references a lot. He'll say something just randomly like, all right, celebrate good times. I'm like, what? Like in my head, I'm like, that's one.
Celebrate good times, come on.
Exactly. And then in my head, that's what's happening, and I'm the uke laughing underneath him.
Yeah. And I tell those jokes for myself, but now it's kind of like for us.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, will he get this one? Will he hear it? And there are some times where I'm laughing off the side, and you're like, hey, you didn't laugh. I'm like, I did. I was laughing over here. Nobody saw me because I was behind everybody, but I was laughing.
Yeah, it seems like nobody else catches on.
Yeah, that might be a generational thing.
Yeah, we're not the youngest in the mat anymore. Totally. So that's a lot of fun. And there was definitely another thing I want to talk about. We mentioned earlier a couple of things that makes you unique as a person and as part of the dojo. The culture here is, your academic background. We kind of went into that, and how you take, how you look at jiu-jitsu and teach it to other people through the lens of academia and your experience as a professor at University of Hawaii. And that you want to be you're a student for life, which being in jiu-jitsu, that's what we are, right? We're a student. Every day we come on the mat. In fact, that's what dojo is, a place of learning. So that's what it means. That's one of the reasons why I love the name Daruma Dojo, because every time we come here, we come into a place of training, a place of learning. But you studied dark matter.
And black holes, yeah.
What does that mean?
So we had this discussion really early on. We were going somewhere, and Alberto just asked me, he's like, hey, what is this thing? I heard you studied it. And I gave him one little quote that blew his mind. And I'm talking to him in third person because he's right here. But I said, in the visible universe that we all know, every instrument we ever have designed to see the universe is less than 7% of the entire universe. So what we can see is only 7% of the entire universe. So what is the rest of it? And that is the question that begs physics to be answered. Like, it's what is the rest of it? What is the 93% that is there? And Alberto asked, like, well, how do we know it's there? How do we know it's only 7%? And I said, well, we know how gravity works really, really well. And gravity has certain side effects on the surrounding objects that we can tell that if something is there, it would move a certain way. And we're seeing the effects of the objects, but not the objects themselves. And so that could mean a whole lot of different things. It could mean they're dark planets, like Earth, like Mars, like Venus, whatever, that there's so much of those that they're causing disturbances in the gravity. Or it could mean something more significant, like black holes. Supermassive things that have such gravity that the light can't escape from them. That's why we're not seeing the light coming from them, because they absorb the light. They gravitationally attract it. In that case, we see the effects of what happens around it. So black holes are actually pretty easy to detect. It's, hey, there should be a star here, but there's not. And you see the orbits around it. And you're like, okay, cool. Or you see the stuff that's being sucked into the black hole, the accretion disk. And then you say, okay, that must be a black hole. But that's only a certain part of it too. It's like, even if you include black holes, it's not 100%. So where's the rest of it? And that's the big question that we were discussing, is how do you figure that out? And that's the big question in physics and astrophysics specifically, is where does dark matter come from? What is it? How do we define it? Why don't we see it? Those types of questions are the big questions in dark matter. And that relates to dark energy.
So when you say dark matter, dark energy, could that be the matter and energy in between us right now?
Yeah.
That we can't see?
Yeah, it could. I mean, there is a theory that says that there's actually matter and space, like space is matter and matter has energy.
Right.
So there could be in a vacuum, like where we consider nothing.
We think this is nothing, but there's
Actually air and molecules, and that's how.
In that case, we're connected right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you're hearing my voice because the vibrations that I'm creating with my vocal cords are vibrating the molecules, vibrating your ears, and you can hear me, right? If we were in space with an actual vacuum, you wouldn't be able to hear anything, right? In that space of nothing, there are theories out there that say, hey, there's energy creation that's happening in nothing. And that's kind of really interesting. And you can get particles and mass that comes out of nothing. And that's mind-blowing to me when you start to really think about it. You could have miles and miles and miles of nothing, and all of a sudden, boop, electron. Where'd you come from? Where? What? How did that happen? But yeah, there's definitely some interesting discussions there. If you want to come find me, we'll talk about it for sure.
That could be a whole. You could do a whole podcast on that alone.
Yeah, like Neil deGrasse Tyson does it. That's his entire job, is to do podcasts about astrophysics stuff. Gotcha. He's amazing. So find him. Star Talk is great.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sometimes I like to listen to Alan Watts, and he kind of looks at the universe like that. Like, me and you are pretty much the same because there is no separation between me and you, because the energy and the matter continues from me to you to the tree to everybody, right? While we always think we're separate, but we're really not. And then when you think as everyone being a part of a whole, he lectures about, then there is no life or death, like it's all part of the same cycle. It's kind of, for me, kind of encouraging, because then that allows us to get out of us being like an individual, and then I don't know, it encourages me to live my life a little more to the fullest, like not like knowing that I'm part of a bigger picture. Yeah,
and the more you study physics, the more you get into that kind of methodology of like, hey, we're all just stardust.
Right.
And that whole idea of just being a stardust is like, we're no different than each other. What makes us different is interesting and philosophical at the same time, is the way I think, and the way is different than the way you think. What composes that that creates a whole metaphysical discussion that could be a whole nother podcast. And it's like, okay, so if we're all the same parts and pieces and everything's the same, why are we different? That's a really compelling question. And how can we reconcile that with like the world as we know it, or universe as we know it, or extraterrestrials as we know it? As soon as we find another alien somewhere, that our whole everything is going to change. The way we outlook on everything is we're not alone, or it'll change everything, how we say everything in the world.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Like, two things. One, you're saying we're just stardust, right? And I learned about optimistic nihilism, which pretty much, once you realize that we are just stardust and we are pretty much nothing in the whole grand scheme of life, right? We're dust in the wind. Then, like, why not do whatever? Like, why not take a risk in life? Because if we only have, if we're only just dust in the wind, then we should take risks and live a life to the fullest, right? And not be scared to make mistakes, because like, if I and I try my best to do something grand and I fail, well, hey, at least I tried, opposed to trying to live a life that's safe.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the optimistic nihilism is a better option than the pessimistic nihilism one. And the pessimistic nihilism, you just stay in your house all day and not do anything.
Right, and that's
like, what's the point?
Sounds like depression.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you mentioned like, okay, if we're all pretty much coming from the same thing, which is, like you said, stars, dust, and you and me are pretty much the same person, and we have the smallest differences, right? It reminds me of like art or jiujitsu, in that you do an armbar from the mount, I do an armbar from the mount, but there's going to be a little different way that we do it. And when I do an armbar from the mount, every time I do it, it's probably going to be slightly different. So I find that really cool about like the art aspect of jiu-jitsu, is that you can teach it one way, But when you know that, especially when I was like a teacher in the beginning, like, oh, this is how you do it, right? But then you start learning, oh no, like I'm only showing you this way because I have to teach you somehow, right? Like I have to teach you this is how you're gonna move your body because that's probably the most efficient and the most practical way for us to put jiu-jitsu into like teachable terms.
Right.
Yeah, but then when you go to apply it, then all the white belts are like, oh, that doesn't work. Coach, they don't know what they're talking about because I'm trying to do it the way he did it, right? But they don't have the experience yet to improvise or make adjustments in the technique in the moment.
Right.
So
I actually have an analogy for this too that I've thought of, is when you first learn colors. My son's 2 years old, he's learning colors, right? And so you learn the primary colors. You got red, blue, yellow, right? And then you realize, hey, wait, there are these things between red, blue, and yellow.
Are those the primary colors? Yeah. Only three?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then red, blue, and yellow mix in different ways to get every other color. So red and blue make purple, blue and yellow make green, et cetera. So we identify them as separate things, but as you grow in jiu-jitsu, as you grow in art, you realize that they're just gradations and variations of the same thing. So imagine you know three concepts.
Right.
Your favorites are frame, shrimp, bridge, right?
From the bottom.
Yeah. Those three things, I can now make variations of all those three things in different combinations to do certain things. So you can break down any escape from the bottom in some kind of variation of those three things. Maybe it's red, green, and blue, or red, yellow, blue, a little bit of red, more yellow, a little bit of blue. And I get this color, I get this concept, and I get this escape. And as I'm seeing the colors through Kai's eyes, now it's like, oh, green is green, but then teal is also green.
Right.
And then yellow-green is also green.
Yeah.
Like it's a gradation, and that it applies directly to the variations that we see in different teaching, right? And or application of that teaching. So, like you said, I teach it one way, you teach it another way. Everywhere in between is also valid. Everywhere in between is also valid as long as the concepts that we are supporting are being done. And that's a great way to think about jiu-jitsu long-term, is that I'm learning concepts that need to be applied, not necessarily moves that need to be applied.
Right. I think that's a really good way to learn jiu-jitsu is through the concepts and principles. I know like the Gracie brothers talked about the 32 principles, right? I've listened to about half of that one. I like it. I think if you can see jiu-jitsu in that way, then you can see how the patterns repeat themselves all throughout. And you're like, oh, wow, this armbar has, the tension, or it has the breaking point, the fulcrum, right? The push-pull. But like, I never saw that until like within the last like few years. I didn't see that white belt, blue belt, purple belt, brown belt. So
yeah, and I didn't either.
I wonder if how much better, or how people can see jiu-jitsu differently if they thought like that as a white belt.
I feel like that's a fairly recent revolution that we've seen, because of the more and more popular that jiu-jitsu gets, the more and more different type of people start practicing and studying jiu-jitsu. And diversity in terms of types of thinking and types of application and everything like that is only going to push jiu-jitsu forward in a way that expands and attracts all different types of people. So it's going to feed more and more people, more different types of people, more teaching styles, more learning styles, more application styles. We may have had like maybe 50 years ago, 10 jiu-jitsu like sources. And even at that point, those were like, this is what worked for them, this is what worked for them, and those are the systems.
That's it.
That's it. You don't get a chance to actually work outside the box.
Their word is
exactly. Their word is that's it. And if you get kicked out of the school if you do something different.
Right.
But because it's become much more popular, you get really interesting variations that say, okay, I found it valuable to reteach it to myself this way. Let me get that out there and see if anybody else is attracted to that type of that style of learning. And it happens, and people are like, oh my, that's for me. I need that. Versus someone else is like, okay, that's for me. I need that. And so that's why maybe the last just 10 years, jiu-jitsu instructionals are amazing. You can have the same content, the exact same content, but taught in like 5 different ways from 5 different people and how they like do it themselves, and it changes your whole game. You find these people that you like or that you can imitate, or that you learn really well from, and then you take that and run. And then maybe you come up with your own learning style, your own teaching style later.
Yeah, I totally. I mean, like I think last couple of days we've been working a lot of leg locks lately, right? And I was learning from like one of the Gordon Ryan when he's talking about grabbing for the straight ankle lock. He's talking about pulling the fist like really close to the chin, and I've never thought about and the way that he pushes his attachment to the hip. And I've been having a lot of success with that style of finishing. But then Professor Mark is watching. He watches Sub Meta, Lachlan Giles, and he finishes with his hand way low, which people are saying like, oh, that's a no-no. Like you don't do that for the straight ankle lock with your foot hand low. I'm not exactly sure what. I haven't really dug into it, but he was kind of telling me like, oh no, because of the way he finishes it, right? So which one is correct?
They both can be correct, right? Yeah. That's the cool thing is that one of the things I learned really early in teaching jiu-jitsu is does this work? I don't know. Let's find out.
Right.
Like if you, I mean, like, I don't know everything. You don't know everything. We're just gonna go figure it out, and you test it through empirical evidence. You go and try it 20 times. Does it work 19 out of 20 times? Probably works. Like, and that to me, that's awesome. If you get two different methodologies, they both work. One fails, you can switch to the other one and still get the same submission, which is awesome.
But they probably have this at least underlying principles that are the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I remember I had a student or a friend of mine actually 2 days ago. We were working on a certain armbar from the guard, and they're like, okay, does this still work if they can opener you, if they pull your neck, right? And I was like, I don't know, let's try. So we gave it a try. We realized like it doesn't work the way that we're teaching it. We're going to have to make a modification. Right. But I think because of our community here, our culture here at Daruma Dojo, because I've seen instructors that they're like, well, like, what if you do this? And then they just like they are not even open to the questions, or they shut you off right away. Like, no, we're doing, this is how it's done. This is how we do it. So it makes me think like we said before, because of the old school when Jiu-Jitsu was, it had fewer sources. Like we don't stray from the tradition, and as Jiu-Jitsu continued to grow, some of that old school or traditional mentality kind of stuck, and maybe because the sources were so small, you know, that people had a really strong grasp as to what they knew, but they didn't know everything. And so when people questioned their ideas, they were maybe afraid to expand because like, hey, I'm supposed to be the source. I shouldn't, you know, so maybe part of that, and that's one thing as a coach, it's sometimes you have to like admit that you don't know the answer, and that's kind of like a humbling thing to do. When someone asks you a question you don't know the answer, you're like, you know, at first when I was purple belt, brown belt, even like an early black belt coach, like I don't want to admit that I don't know the answer, but I can make an educated guess, or I can say I don't know. Let's find out. Let's put ourselves in that situation like we did with the can opener, and try to make the technique work.
Yeah, and I welcome any of those types of questions because then it gives me an opportunity to go back to the paper, go back to the studying, go back to finding sources and resources that help me solve that problem. And I'm more than happy to say, you know what, I don't know that right now. Give me a week. I'll come back next week with some information.
Yeah.
And a lot of times that is what is needed in order to digest the question properly, to understand what the real issue is, find those solutions, and then come back and be able to process it in a way that you can now teach it. Like it'd be very hard to be able to say, yeah, I know the answer to everything and try to come up with a solution right then and there. I think that's terribly difficult.
Yeah.
But if you say, you know what, I don't know, but I'll get back to you.
Yeah.
I think that's super beneficial, and it builds the trust with the community members, like you said. If it's okay to say, I don't know. It's totally okay because we're all learning this together. And then we both go research it, come back, and come up with wildly different solutions to the problem, which is always good.
Yeah. Yeah, we had another student the other day asking about how to finish a certain foot lock, and he was talking about the angle, and I was like, I have no idea. Like, I need to play with that, and I can't answer that right now, so I still haven't played with it yet, so it's just a reminder. So you've been training with me now for, what, almost 3 years?
I think so.
2.5 at least.
Yeah.
A little over a year at the UFC. Now a little over a year here at Daruma. So I would say at least 2.5 years. Man, I really appreciate you being part of the Daruma Dojo team and community. Like, you were one of the first ones to come follow and to be part of the team here. And what is it about the Daruma Dojo culture or about what we're doing that you, because you've seen so many different teachers being traveling from different UFC gyms to Hawaii. Like, what is it about Daruma Dojo that resonates with you?
So we built a really great community here. And yeah, we planted it somewhere else and we brought it here, transplanted it here. And that's the community that I would love to be a part of. And when we moved, it was like, of course I'm going. Of course I'm going with the community that I helped build, right? It was one of those, like, we create these relationships with people, our students and our community members here, that are going to last outside the gym. Like, they exist outside the gym. We go to dinner, we have barbecues, we hang out outside the gym, we help people move. That type of stuff. It's not just go to the gym, pretend to kill each other, leave the gym, and then it ends at the gym. No, like, there is a lot of support that we have here that we've created from the ground up. And that, to me, is incredibly attractive in a gym. You can go to a gym and you feel like you're a nothing, a nobody. Nobody knows your name. Nobody knows where you come from, who you are, or like what kind of family members you have. Nobody knows if you have kids or not. And it's like, they don't care. And that's one of those things, like, if you want to be part of something that's bigger than just jiu-jitsu and bigger than just a jiu-jitsu gym, Daruma's the place to come.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Because, you were at UFC gym for so long, with Hawaii and then here in Sunnyvale, and that the fact that you were like, hey, I'm ready to go build something different. So that really means a lot to me. What is it about our community you think, like, you're saying, like, hey, we're building relationships outside of the gym. We're seeing it, it's more than just jiu-jitsu. It's we're seeing each other as humans, creating camaraderie or friendship. Like, are those the things that you think are really important for a BJ community, or like what else?
Oh, yeah.
What else
Like,
is it very important to
you
you
can't-
that we're doing? Or
You can't do this sport without having trust in your partners. And without that trust, number one, if I don't know your name, I don't know where you're from or anything like that, do you think I'm gonna trust you very much? Probably not.
Right.
And
if
so
somebody has me in an arm bar and I tap, I gotta trust.
You gotta trust that the tap's being respected, right?
Yeah, they're not gonna rip my arm off.
And so, like, that community, like, yes, at first, when you first start, you don't know anybody, and it's really intimidating. But it can take a class or two to get a good understanding of, like, these people are here to help, not necessarily to hurt. And that only takes half a class to get that feeling. If you go to some gyms and you just go into, like, you go in there and you feel like, I didn't have a chance to learn anything. All I was doing was surviving. And it wasn't like I'm looking out for you kind of mentality. It was like, oh, I'm gonna hurt you. Like, that is not an encouraging environment. Like, that's not something that I personally would go back to again. And I feel like every single person that comes has a welcoming attitude from all of the community members here to say, like, yeah, come in, we're gonna have a good time, you're gonna learn some stuff, you're gonna learn jiu-jitsu, you're gonna be safe. You don't have to worry about, being intimidated or being hurt in a way that other gyms might. Right. I think that's incredibly valuable when you're shopping around for jiu-jitsu gyms.
And that, what we're talking about now, is the main reason why I wanted to start the podcast, was to get to know my our friends and our students and our coaches better. And then, like, not only can we have a conversation and talk about, like, how we see jiu-jitsu or how, what we've done in our lives and things like that, but now other people in the gym can learn more about us, learn more about you. And you were the first person that, like, man, I want to talk to Noah, because you've been such a huge part of Daruma Dojo from the very beginning. You were one of the people that followed and played such a huge part, and I could see that you believe in it. If I were to leave my gym to anybody, it'd be to you.
Thank you.
Right? You're the only person there's other people that I trust, but you're number one on the list that I would say, hey, if I had to leave, me and Keiko had to go, or something happened to us, the gym would be yours.
Oh,
Okay, and so I got to talk to you first, and I think like it's a great way for people to get to know you better, and then get to know our culture better. And man, thank you for the conversation.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
I love
it's
you.
An honor. I love you too.
All right, brother. Thank you. See you next time at the Daruma Dojo Dialogues.